I'm Wayne Pollock. I'm a thought leadership ghostwriter, serving big law and boutique law firm partners, as well as executives at companies that serve the legal industry. I help these attorneys and these executives build their prominence one word at a time. Let's talk about 4 common misconceptions that I hear regarding thought leadership that's ghostwritten, and let's debunk those 4 misconceptions. The first misconception I hear is that when an attorney or an executive works with a thought leadership ghostwriter, the material produced is not going to be the attorneys or the executives, it's going to be the ghostwriters. That's just not true. In my experience, 95% of the finished work product, the article that I've written for a client, is their idea. It's their thoughts, it's their concepts. It's my job as a ghostwriter, and it's other ghostwriters' jobs, to take that raw material that we get from our client during a phone call or a video call and to rephrase it, to reframe it, to connect dots, to make it flow. When you do that, you naturally add some words and some sentences, but the point is to connect the dots and to take the raw material that the client has given you and form it into a finished product. So I say 95% of the finished product is the client's because I add some words, I add some sentences to clear things up and to make sure the reader is easily following from the beginning to the end and getting what they need to get. But the majority of the finished product is the client's ideas and concepts. The point of ghostwriting is to work on a collaborative basis and to make sure that you are taking the client's materials and putting it out there. The point of ghostwriting is not to add what you think your client wants to say. You take their concepts and you elevate them through refining them and presenting them in a way that's most relevant, valuable, and compelling to their target audience. On a related point, the second misconception I hear is that an attorney or an executive really isn't in control of the process when they use a ghostwriter. They're outsourcing everything. That's, again, flat out wrong. As I just mentioned, attorneys and executives and any other person who is working with a ghostwriter is very much in control. One, there is typically some kind of interview before the article is written where the ghostwriter gets information from the client about what they want to say in the article. Then the client is involved throughout the process. Once the ghostwriter has written a first draft, they send it to the client, and the client has a chance to review it, revise it as they see fit. Maybe they make their own revisions. Maybe they give the ghostwriter some notes, and the ghostwriter incorporates those notes and revises it themselves. But then that goes back to the client to review. And it's not until the client is happy that they are going to have a finished article. The whole point of ghostwriting is for the client to save a lot of time on the process by investing a little bit of time on the front end and a little bit of time on the back end. The small investment on the front end is the interview ahead of the writing, and the investment on the back end is making revisions and providing comments. That maybe combined 45 to 60 minutes on the front end and back end total helps save 4, 5, 6 hours of the client actually doing the writing. So the client is in control throughout the process. Just because the ghostwriter is doing the heavy lifting doesn't mean the client isn't involved. It's quite the opposite. The client is controlling the entire process. The third misconception I hear is that it's unusual for executives, attorneys, and other people to use ghostwriters. Why won't people just write what they're thinking like normal people do? Well, that's again just not true. Ghostwriters are commonplace among celebrities, politicians, athletes, academics. It's not unusual for people to use ghostwriters when they are too busy to do the writing themselves. As long as they can convey their thoughts and their ideas to the ghostwriter, they can rely on the ghostwriter to bring into the world and put into the world that person's thoughts, ideas, and concepts. Attorneys use ghostwriters often, but they don't call them ghostwriters. They're just associates or colleagues. So many times attorneys ask colleagues and associates to write the first draft of a contract, write the first draft of a motion, or write the first draft of a brief, when those documents will have that attorney's name at the bottom. But they're not taking the first crack. They're giving their colleague, the associate, some guidance, and then they are allowing them to do the first draft, and then they'll come in on the back end and make any changes. It's not unusual for people to use ghostwriters. Politicians have been using speechwriters, arguably, back to when this country was founded, And certainly in the 20th century and the 21st century, politicians are using speechwriters and ghostwriters constantly when they are writing speeches, when they are writing articles or op-eds to help make their cases to the people regarding particular concepts. Finally, the fourth misconception I often hear is that it's just not necessary for attorneys to use thought leadership ghostwriters. Attorneys are writing this material already as part of their daily work and as part of their daily marketing and business development efforts. Why would they need a ghostwriter? That makes sense on its face, but when you look at it and you think about it more, you realize that's just ridiculous, that it's not necessary. Attorneys at billable commitments consume most of their time. When they actually do have some free time to engage in marketing and business development efforts, it makes sense for them to engage in the kind of marketing and BD efforts that they can't have anyone else do but themselves. For example, giving webinars, attending conferences, meeting with clients and prospective clients over a meal or over coffee. These types of business development activities and marketing activities are things that attorneys just can't outsource at the moment. But they can outsource writing. They can rely on a ghostwriter, as many attorneys do when they rely on associates to draft the first draft of an article or a client alert or a blog post that they'll be publishing under their own name. And of course, few attorneys are publishing the amount of thought leadership that jives with the number of ideas that they have. So often, I come across attorneys who have great ideas for thought leadership, and they just don't have the time to put those ideas out into the world. That's why they need a ghostwriter. They're comfortable writing it themselves, but they need help because they're just too busy to do it themselves. We're in an era where building a personal brand and engaging in thought leadership has moved from a nice to have to a need to have for attorneys and executives at companies that serve the legal industry. Ghostwriting is still a relatively new concept for attorneys and executives at companies that serve the legal industry, but they shouldn't be so quick to poo-poo it, nor should their marketing and business development colleagues be so quick to poo-poo it. It might just be the answer to what ails them in terms of their shortcomings with respect to building their personal brands and engaging in thought leadership that can position them as leaders in their practices and leaders in the legal industry. If you're interested in learning more about the thought leadership ghostwriting process, or you're looking for tips and tricks for how to create the kinds of thought leadership that helps position you as an industry leader, check out lawfirmeditorialservice.com. We have plenty of videos, blog posts, and podcast episodes that can help you do just that.